So you know that there's a change. Well, no, it's not a change because it's actually now, and we keep forgetting that it's live. The Year 12s, the lucky things in this great year, are going to, yet again, as the first Year 7s, they'll be the first Year 12s through with this in quite a challenging environment. And we've learnt a lot through the time that we've had with them, including Year 11 as well, and what we've learnt from having Year 11 for the second time through. So the pathways that we're going to be talking about tonight are going to be big and general, okay, because we'll narrow it down and be more specific when we have our face-to-face interviews with you. But I want to point out that paths are made by walking. And I know that sounds silly, or they're done by bulldozing or running, but they take effort. And in the next few weeks, we need to match our desire to get good pathways with the effort that we put into preparing for it. And you'll hear a little bit about what we've done with your young person in getting them ready for some of this, but there's still some work to be done. So it's not just going to suddenly appear in an easy way. There's going to be some work we all need to do. So we call a SET plan, okay, because, you know, we love acronyms in education, and saying senior education training and pathway planning process, it's sometimes just a bit exhausting. So we call it a SET plan. And I just want to remind you that for us, it's like, for some of you, it's the first time that we've sat down for a good period of time, for 30 minutes, and had a good conversation about your education, since we did that when you were in Year 6, if you started with us. So it's a really good opportunity to consider it also a re-enrolment or an enrolment interview, again, for the next part of your pathway. So that's how we choose to look at it as well. So it's a mandated process, and what I mean by that is it's actually legislation that we're required to run the process. And of course, there's a big difference between being made to do a process and actually doing a process well for what you're trying to achieve. So I hope that you get a really good understanding of what we're trying to achieve through this tonight. A re-enrolment interview. So this is really like a recommitment between family, student and school about what it's going to look like as we transition to grade 11 and 12. And it's really quite a big milestone. And for some of us who have been through this with our own children, it's a bit scary in some regards too, because we're reminded of how fast things are happening and how quickly, before we know it, there'll be a graduation and there'll be an ATAR, or there'll be a job, or there'll be university placements. And we know how that works as a parent. It can suddenly feel like it was only yesterday. So the question is really, I guess, where we're up to. And I was hoping that some of you will have remembered or heard or read the narrated slideshow that was sent out to Year 10 parents before the holidays, which basically went out and did a summary of what this is all about. We've had lots and lots of activity at school with SET planning for the Year 10s, and Mr. Crosby's going to address that soon. University online, some of your students and some of you have actually already enrolled in some open days and opportunities for university, because last year my husband was taking my Year 10 child to unis on the weekend. I couldn't do it because we would have just fought about it the whole time, so I delegated it to someone much more patient than me. The other person who can actually also teach children to drive, because they have much more patience. But I think part of the thing about universities is, what are they, what do they look like, what they feel like, and actually going there and visiting them is actually important. And we've done a number of those visits ourselves with the kids as an excursion, but going there on the weekend and going to an open day can be helpful. That's not happening this year, but they've got great online alternatives. So if you're thinking about studying a particular subject at a particular university, great idea for you to be able to get online and participate in their online activities. Year 10 is not too early to do that. Okay. And we do know we've got probably between 8 and 10 kids already who've applied for TAFE at school. They've processed those applications. They've been listening. Miss Hope's here. Yep. And so if they're interested in doing 1 day a week at TAFE, they've processed and started that already. So in terms of pathways, it's really important for us to remember everything I say tonight is general. So it's the big idea for everybody, and that everybody's path will look different. So maybe your child's path to whatever it is after school will look like this: leafy, green, shady, straight line, no obstacles. Maybe might look a bit more like this. Or you could think you're going one way and then you might go the other. And we know that happens. They're grade 10. The key though is accepting that, but making sure that we've kept every option open and done the best that we can to know that this is going to happen, and make sure that we future-proof the plan. So the key messages from me tonight are going to be these. You really need to do the work around all of this before you come to the interview. So there'll be some work that they have to do online through the One School program, and we will be looking. So if you're on my list or Miss Hope's list, we're going to be going in and out of your One School account and have a good look at it, see how much work you've done. And I would actually say there is no point coming into an interview if you haven't done all this pre-work. It's really important, because you will then get to check your thinking with the expert in the room who can help you. Okay. And I know that some students say, yeah, but I still don't know what I want to do. That's okay. There's a whole heap of things that they have done through SETP Planning that will help them to move towards that, and we'll show you that a bit later. This is really important. It might not make sense yet, but there are really strong prerequisites, things that you definitely need to be able to do and know for your post-school study, but also for grade 11. And you need to know what they are. So if you think you want to go and do engineering at University of Queensland, you need to know what subjects they're going to expect you to do. If you want to become an electrician, you need to be very clear on what mathematics they're going to be expecting you to do. We will help you with all of that, but that's a very serious consideration for you when you pick your subjects. If you're thinking of getting an Australian tertiary admissions rank and a tertiary entrance score, you have to think about what the range of that ATAR score will be. And I'll address that directly later in the presentations. And if you're interested in vocational education, before the interview, you need to be aware of some of these things, and everything that we've set up for you in your packs and in the information we're giving kids will help you to do that. So you can know what the traineeship arrangements are, understand how apprenticeships work in school, know how you can apply to go to TAFE at school. And they're pretty important because some of the TAFE at school courses are 18 months long, aren't they, Miss Hopes? And if you don't enrol at the right time, you can't actually get through it while you're at school. Okay, because they're TAFE at school qualifications. Okay, so that doesn't all make sense now, but they're the key messages I want you to take away with today. The demands of the syllabus are really, really important to know. What do I mean by that? You come to me and say, I want to do psychology, okay? And I'll ask you the question, what do you do in psychology? What is one of the internal assessments? What does it look like? What does a 50% exam look like? How are you prepared to do the content? The syllabuses, and those of you who've had a look at the narrated slideshow will know, they're all available. They're published, they're there, they're very high definition, and you can get in and check them now, right now. So that's the other part of the work that we really would like you to do. Very important. And easy public-facing documents with those syllabuses where you can see what the external exam might look like. Doesn't mean you need to know the content now, but you need to understand the demands of the syllabus so that you're really prepared for it and you know what's coming. So they're my key messages. I'm going to ask Mr. Sparks now to can you please get Mr. Crosby's key messages up, because he's going to tell you all the things that he has done with your young person that I'm sure they've been talking to you about at home.
Hello everyone, sorry I couldn't make it there tonight, but just want to pass on a few messages in my absence. Over the past term, the Year 10 students have been provided a lot of information during what would normally be our pastoral care time slot to help prepare them for SET planning and this career pathway juncture. So if your child hasn't been getting on to eLearn or checking their emails to complete the activities, please make sure they do so as soon as possible. One resource they should have worked through is the My Future website. Part of that is they've been able to build their career profile, looked at some occupations, and looked at some key industries. They've also looked at some courses, some institutions and organisations they may connect with later on in their schooling or post-schooling life, and then looked at the career bullseye. So these are some great ones where they can look at a subject and then look at all the different careers which are related to that subject. And then finally, we looked at some case studies to look at people who have similar interests as themselves. After this, we moved on to looking at the Australian Government's Job Outlook website. And this, they will have to look at some skills match, career quizzes, explore some industries in Australia, and look at where the workforce is likely to be in the future. The final careers website which the students work through is called Skills Road. On this, they're able to complete their own profile by completing some quizzes to again give them some insight on jobs that they might be interested in. Then they also have the opportunity, if they want to work on a resume and cover letter in case they're going to start applying for work. By now, your child should also have a lot better understanding around the Queensland Curriculum and Assessment Authority. We particularly focused on getting an understanding around what is a QCE, looking at what it means to be in senior schooling and planning their pathway for the future. Over the past 3 weeks during Wednesday when they'd usually go home for sport, your child has also been getting some really important information to prepare them for their SET plan. So in week 1, we gave them a really good overview on what SET planning is, distributed some folders with some key information which they need to bring for their SET plan interview, and they also looked at some TAFE and university videos. In week 2, they looked at the MyPath website. This is something which every Year 10 student all across Queensland would do, and then complete their SET planning on one school. So this is something which we'll go through during the SET planning. And they applied for their USI number, so that's a unique student identifier, and that'll follow them around for the rest of their life. And this week, so just this afternoon, we had the Explore Uni guest speakers coming out and do a SET planning preparation presentation. Some advice and tips I'd give your child when you're trying to choose the right subjects would be making sure they choose subjects which they enjoy, choose subjects which they're good at, choose subjects which are needed for their chosen career, and make sure they choose subjects which keep their career options open. If your child is still really unsure around what their career pathway looks at, this is normal. Okay, it's likely to change in year 11 and 12 and post-schooling as well, but it is important that we start trying to get into the career pathway which we're most likely to finish off in. We were supposed to early in the year do the Careers and Employment Expo, but this has been postponed to the 9th of October. But some other things your child could be doing to start preparing as well. They could be talking to family and friends, meeting with the school guidance officer, do more research online, talk to their teachers or senior school staff, attend open days and career expos, do work experience, read the subject selection guide very carefully, and make sure they regularly check the emails. It's an important step as we enter the senior school. There are a lot of great opportunities which get emailed out to them. While their subjects are very important, it's really important that they're also focusing on employability skills. Later in the year, there's going to be an employability skills workshop, help them start working on resumes, start working on interview practice. So if your child's starting to look at a part-time job or just wants to build their employability skills, make sure they come along to these sessions. My final piece of advice would be making sure that you choose subjects which are going to get you into a job which you love and that you're going to enjoy. You're going to be working for over 40 years. It's a long time to be going every single day to a job which you don't enjoy. Okay, so reasons not to be choosing subjects or a job is because your friends want to do it or because you think it's going to earn money. Okay, so the most important one, make sure you choose things which you're going to enjoy going to for the next 40 years.
Can I just have a show of hands for the parents who have heard some of this stuff being talked about at home or seen some of the work being done? Excellent. That's great. And I guess my reflection on this for me, remembering how I accidentally ended up in the subjects I ended up in at school and how I accidentally stumbled into the university degree I ended up in, it's a very different world. And I think it's a little bit like that because we know how engaging young people in these conversations has long-term a better outcome. It's really important, and to actually look beyond just the finish of school, not in a way that says you have to know exactly what you want to do, but know the skills that you're going to need, the areas of interest, what you might need to develop better at, and particularly what are the prerequisites. So when you're 25, you don't say, oh, that school I could have done maths methods and I didn't do it because I was too slack. Or my mother let me drop instrumental music when I wish I had kept doing it. Those sorts of regrets that come if people have just let you drift along, I want to try to avoid them. And I know that's mission impossible, but in most cases I would like to try to support parents so that you are really confident that you've had all the information you need so you can be the best supporter, cheer squad, and help your child on the best pathway. So that's what. And there's a lot of information, but you will get better and better at understanding this as we progress. So of course you've met Michael. Miss Allison, she will be your friend. She is most children's friend. She's also a very good giver of emails, and email people is our friend as well. I know for our young people, my son, seriously, he says to me, oh, well, I'll check an email if I know one's coming. Now, he's not a silly boy, but he doesn't realise how silly that is. Like, how do you know that it's coming, Samuel? And email is the primary source of communication older people use. We don't Instagram, we don't Snapchat, we don't post it on Facebook. There's actually other ways of communicating, and we need to learn that. So I would welcome some reminders from home about checking emails, because Alison sends through some amazing opportunities. But they're not right for everybody either. So remember, everyone's pathway is unique. So you can just delete the ones that aren't relevant, but please don't miss those opportunities. Yeah. And Michael, of course, who is at home looking after his beautiful baby. Guidance officers and heads of department are really helpful. So if you're a bit worried about a particular subject, or whether or not you think it's suitable, having the conversation with a head of department who really can have a look at your child's results and their portfolios and give you good feedback. And of course, Miss Hassam, she's great. She can, if you've got a general inquiry and you're not quite sure who to talk to, if you send her an email, she will pretty quickly work out who needs to be in front of you and helping you and supporting you. You know we love an acronym, hey? And I know some of you will have gone through this on the narrated slideshow, and eventually I promise you, I don't promise you that you'll be saying it in your sleep, but you will know what all this means with great confidence. So the Queensland Certificate of Education, it's the game plan for everybody. ATAR is the Australian Tertiary Admissions Rank. Not the OP anymore, it's an ATAR. Senior Assessment and Tertiary Entrance. That's the whole big program that runs senior schooling. QTAC. Right now for grade 12s, they're starting their QTAC process, because I don't decide who gets to go to uni, people. You actually have to apply to an authority called QTAC. And that's where these things that might have gone on in junior secondary around making allowances come apart, because there are really tight rules around that, and you do become your USI number, your USI number pretty well for a period of time. So QTAC. QCAA. Now, this was one that Mr. Crosby referred to. It's the spot you will go to check out all the syllabuses. It's the place that will send you your senior statement. It's the place where they manage the learning accounts. It's where, again, Miss Hope's best friend, that's where we send all the information about your results. They administer and supervise external exams. Okay, so they're very important in our world and in your child's world. So there are so many different ways to get to the way you want to get there, and not everybody necessarily gets it right first time. Our big thing is to make sure that, however possible, everybody gets a QCE or a QCIA. Some kids will get a QCE and vocational certificates or qualifications, some students. And some students will get an ATAR. But not everybody has to get everything. And it really does depend on what it is you think you want to do. And what we will always do, we will try as hard as we can to guard and future-proof your selections so that your options are open. It's easier to start with a range of subjects that are wide and give you access to a broad range of things, and then narrow. You can't do it the other way. Okay. So, a reminder, school subjects are general and applied. You can do a mix of both. For a QCE, you can do a couple of general, a couple applied. The problem is, you can also do TAFE at school. Problem is you actually have to make sure that you reach a magic 20 points. We will help to make sure your pathway you select is QCE proof. However, there are really tight requirements of how you gain those points. And I'll talk a little bit about those later. So it's not just, remember the pathway, to make a pathway you've got to walk. To get a qualification you have to work. You have to earn those points. And how you earn them will look different depending on your pathway. Okay, so we will be really specific when it comes to your interview, but I'm being general tonight. Don't limit your options. Don't limit your options. That's really, really important. For example, there are requirements for your range of subjects if you want to do primary teaching. And if that's vaguely something in your career bullseye program, right, if that's something that came up as something you might be interested in, you need to know. And you need to know that enough to make sure you pick a range. We will guide you with that. We have loads of experience about what constitutes a really valuable broad range of subjects for those kids who don't specifically have a goal. But if you come to me and say, right, I'm going to do engineering, it's going to be a completely different conversation because there are requirements for engineering that I can't negotiate you out of. Okay, so that's the truth of prerequisites and understanding them. The other thing you need to think about is the long game, because most people get quite stuck on getting that ATAR score, or getting just that QCE. We really are trying to encourage young people and families to think about, well, yes, that's super important, but what happens after? What's going to happen in your second and third year of university? How successful are you going to be if you opt into a trade? What skills do you need to be the very best you can be just beyond that number? And that's really important. So senior, learning is the work, regardless of your pathway. Regardless of your pathway. You have to, if you want to come back to high school and do year 11 and 12, you have to be committed to all the things that this school offers, because we're a traditional high school. Okay, so we're not like Alexandra Hills used to be back in the day, where you could go to high school there, you could smoke, you could wear no uniform, you could just you called your teachers their first names. Back in vocational world, that's not an option. It's still very much a conservative secondary school. So of course working hard, being at school, part of the uniform, all that sort of stuff is part of the story for another 2.5 years. One of the important things to know is when we come through and have these conversations with whether or not you want to be ATAR, whether or not you want to be QCE with vocational, we will help you through that when you've done the work and the thinking and the talking about what you think you would like to do. When you've done your career bullseye stuff, when you've gone in and had to think about those things, when you can tell me what sort of ATAR range you might mean, we will help. Super important here. Regardless of the pathway, your child will have homework. It's really important to be at school, and it is hard work. and not everything will be really super easy. So regardless of the combination of subjects, it's a big commitment in year 11 and 12. This is one, I think if you talk to any kid in grade 11 or 12 who are in the general subjects particularly, missing class time and school time in some of those general subjects is just so hard, because the pace of the curriculum in the senior general subjects is really quick. That is why we won't be permitting certain students in certain subjects from doing 1 day a week at TAFE, because you couldn't afford to lose 1/3 of the instruction during the week in a particular math subject. Really hard. You have to catch up yourself. And I guess some of us as parents would remember how that would feel. Like, that might be a great idea now, but are you actually prepared to do the work to catch up on the work you've missed? That's part of an honest conversation. So we've really learnt a lot through the first year of ATAR, and we've got the grade 12s coming through now. So we really feel confident to be able to tell you the things that we have learnt, but also the things that we would guide you through. I would say though, it's not that different. If you're looking to get a really good senior result, you're going to have to work hard. If you want to be the top 5% academically, you're going to have to work hard, and you're going to have to pick particular subjects. So that hasn't changed very much at all. But for your child and for you individually, you need to base your decisions on real data. You don't base the decisions on what your brother or sister did. You don't base, the decision on what your neighbours think. Because I don't know about you, but do you reckon everybody has an opinion on education? And everybody knows best, don't they, hey? I mean, we know that, we feel that all the time. But so I guess this is where it's a really honest conversation between parent, child, school, and let's get on the same page around it. And the world is a bit different from when we all went to school as parents. It is. So I guess resisting the temptation of projecting onto our child of the subjects that we did or what we were good at, and having those honest conversations with them about what are they good at, what do they enjoy, and trying to dodge the mistake some of us have made around projecting some of our opinions of that on our children. And students, this is mainly you. Just because your best friend might be choosing a subject doesn't mean you should. You are running your own race. You are running and making your own path, and that's really, really important. Things to be clear on. Part-time work is really important that you're clear on what that looks like in your family. And again, it would depend on your pathway. If you're doing 6 general subjects and 4 of those have 50% external exams, I'd be saying you need to really strictly follow that rule of thumb that says 10 hours a week is about all you can manage in part-time work. If you want something else, it's a different story. But that's stuff to really have a conversation with. And of course, these lovely things. We will work persistently on this with everybody around distractions. And now this one's really important, parents. The system is a lot tighter around assessment, around timely assessment, because we send all our work to get confirmed by markers external to the school. We have timelines around that. If you came to me and said, look, we booked a 2-week holiday in the middle of internal assessment 3, we're going to go, we would really struggle with QCAA accepting that. Wouldn't happen. So it's really important to consider that for year 12, well actually the end of year 11 too, because you start year 12 and year 11 in some subjects. It's really tight, but also just missing that content. And I guess, thankfully, we probably won't be going anywhere for a little while, hey, at the moment with travel. But I raise that because I know how as a parent sometimes time gets away and you look and go, oh, maybe it'd be a really good opportunity for us to do this now. Holidays during year 12 won't necessarily get you extensions or any consideration at all from QCAA. So I know that's coming up pretty quickly, so have a think about those things as well, please. The part-time work's a big one because we need to manage our short-term gain and love of money and our need to have it against what we're trying to achieve long-term. And this is what grade 11 and 12 becomes, a little bit of a dance around this, and Alison has these conversations often. So a young person comes in the room and says, I think I want to drop this subject so I can do this, and then I'll be able to go and do this, because if I add up those points, I'll get that. And Miss Hopes will say, if you stay in that class and you work hard and pass, you're going to be okay. So sometimes we might look for a way around something for your young person, but most of the time we try to do it as straight down the line as we possibly can. And that's important, because looking for wiggle room that avoids hard work, there is none. There is none. So what we know, if you're not sure, keep your options open. If you are capable of doing the work, you should do it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the prerequisites and requirements post-school. But if you are capable of doing the syllabus work, you should do it. And the world is super competitive, and our job is to make sure that we prepare you to be the very best that you can be. And part of that is about making sure that we've picked a range of subjects that help you to keep your options open. And I think this year has shown everybody how different the world can be in a one fell swoop. And I guess being able to be flexible, being able to learn differently, and all those sorts of things are pretty critical to future success. So 2021 is going to be year 11. And sorry, parents, this always makes them, it's quite scary. I think I might have said this to you guys when you were in grade 6, some of you. 2022 will be your QCE and ATAR year. But my question is around what will you be doing in 2027? And I say this because we get bogged down on that ATAR score. But will you still be doing the course at university that you signed up for? Will you still have your apprenticeship, or will you lose it because you won't put your phone away? So it's the long game. Did you do the mathematics that built your problem solving so well that it didn't matter what they threw at you at university? It's the long game. So the other part of the story, especially for those students who are considering going off into university, it's not just only about the number. Of course, you need the right number to get into the course. But if you get into, say, a trade, what do you think the demands of the mathematics is going to be in that trade? We know from the electricians, for example, they've got a high level of maths requirement. That's what we want, isn't it? Nobody wants an electrician going up into your ceiling not being able to read a circuit board. Yeah? That's the long game, and that's the truth of the careers that they're thinking of going into. This is another one, with mathematics particularly. How will you manage the statistics unit you might have to do in second year university if you haven't done a challenging enough mathematics at school? Will you have to do a bridging course? If you were capable of doing the more challenging maths at school, that's when you should do it and learn those skills. And some of your children are probably saying, I don't want to put the effort in, I know how hard it is. Okay, but then don't be surprised when you rock into your second year university and there's a statistics unit and the kids who did maths methods, and they might have only got a C, can do it, because they learnt those processes in that harder mathematics. So they're the things to consider as well. And it's the long game. So the long game in the workplace. I use this one around the students who graduate from here and go to first year university, have done economics at high school and then nail it and get a 7 in economics first year uni. And everyone will say, well, you'd expect that, wouldn't you? Doesn't always happen. The reason we have a curriculum is actually to build their skills to be able to perform post-school, not just to get that number. So that's really important to remember. And writing. And we get that. A lot of kids who come back to us to talk to us say their university lecturers or tutors will ask them where they learnt to write like that. And of course I say, well, school, you'd hope. Yeah, okay. So these are the 21st century skills. I know you've seen this before, but they're pretty important. They're the things that the QCAA has put into the syllabuses. They expect us to teach that as well as the content. And they're all about that long game, about preparing young people to be as flexible as they can for the world of work that we don't know will exist. Remembering that I need you to have a really clear idea of the syllabus demands. This week you will get the Year 10 Semester 1 report card, but you will also get a letter of recommendations as to the maths, we call it readiness for the general syllabuses. So there'll be a recommendation around what mathematics your child is capable of doing based on what they're doing now and their performance, and similarly with English. That will then guide you for all the other subjects because they're quite strongly the basis of the senior pathway. The readiness piece is super important. The foundational skills all the way through are what your child's going to have to lean on in grade 11 and 12. Year 7 to 10 is the Australian curriculum. 11 to 12 is the Australian curriculum. They are based on the fundamentals of English, maths, science, reading and writing. So those syllabuses in grade 11 and 12 just haven't been plucked out of the air. There's foundational knowledge and skills that you're expecting to know from year 7 to 10. And when you get in and have a look at those syllabuses, you'll see it. It's very obvious, and the differences. So you really need to know the prerequisites, and by that I mean university or trade prerequisites as well. Okay, so what do you have to do? It's easy to say, a kid saying to me, I want to be a tradie. Okay. What trade would you like? And what skills do you need? What qualifications do you need? How are you going to get through the interview? They're the things that we ask the question about. What are the prerequisites for your university degree that you want to do? If you want to do a Bachelor of Finance at University of Queensland, what ATAR score do you need and what maths do they want? They're the sorts of things that we need to be across and prepared to answer. And of course, for all of us, we're always trying to build our kids' social and communication and employability skills. That's going to be increasingly important when it comes to trying to get employment, but also engaging effectively at university. And this is something to know, and you know we've tried to do this semester with the laptop classes, and we all know how big the leaning in on technology was during term 2. So digital technologies and learning are actually a part of the senior curriculum, and there's an expectation that it's embedded across the curriculum. So for year 11 and 12, all students are going to be expected to have a laptop. How we get that to them, we will have those conversations during SET planning interviews. And I think the one thing this has taught all of us in the last 6 months is how workplaces will very quickly change and how the expectations around being able to engage in your workplace will change. So being really IT savvy, that doesn't mean they're experts on their phone. We actually mean using it as a learning tool. That doesn't just sit for those people who are looking at university. but all TAFE online, all the workplace health and safety units that come in for the vocational stuff will all be online. Those of you who know or have a first year university student will realise, or a university student at all, how their whole world's changed. And I don't see them getting 500 kids in a lecture centre in the next couple of years probably. So being able to manage ourselves in that digital environment, and I think it's so funny that I'm saying this because I'm a complete and utter dinosaur. And I've had to work so hard at this. Thankfully, these two people over here kept me honest about it. But finding those ways and being confident. And the only way that happens is by using it consistently in classes. So QCE, you look for 20 points and you'll have a different pathway to get them. These are all the different requirements. You've got them in the pack. We will super manage that through the subjects you choose. We won't let anybody choose a pathway that comes up with 16 points. So don't distress about that right now. We might be having conversations halfway through grade 11 if your child hasn't passed English and they're at risk because of the literacy component, and that'll be Miss Hopes and a whole, but right now your biggest thing is around making sure you do the work about the prerequisites and what they're thinking of doing, and knowing that we've set up our subject selections to pretty well manage that, the 20 points. There's lots of detail about how you get all of that, and if you want to know, it's in your pack. But it really does rely heavily on whatever pathway your child decides to choose. Literacy and numeracy, a huge part of it though. You cannot get a QCE if you don't meet the literacy and numeracy requirements. And again, we will manage you with that, with the selections you make. It's not the selections that are the problem most of the time. It's the work that doesn't get done after, where we have to bring you in and say, all right, they selected this English but haven't done the work, and they've dropped a unit, semester 1, so they're at risk now for their QCE. If you're looking at university, post-school, and this goes for everybody, not just the people who think they want to do it right after school, but if there's a chance, there are certain subjects we definitely need to make sure you do now so that you don't get disadvantaged later. So the ATAR, that's how you get into uni basically. QTAC, our friend, they calculate it. Traditionally, conservatively, general subjects make up most of the pathway for an ATAR. There's school-based subjects and school-based assessment. There's 3 internal assessments that are run here that are then sent away to get confirmed for marking. And then there's external assessment. And you will have heard about that, the 50% maths and science tests at the end of the year and the 25% for others. So they're marked. We don't mark them. We don't see them. It's very super managed. I think 26th of October is the start of the 18-day exam block for the current Year 12s. So it's you can see the risk here, 50% exam. And if you're getting a QCE and you're hanging on the edge and you go in and you don't pass, there could be some risk there. So that's our job to work with you to help monitor that. There are things called instrument-specific marking guides. Get in and have a look at them on the syllabuses. I really encourage you to become as syllabus literate as you can be, particularly about the subjects you think you want to do, because that's where you'll find the truth of the content and the truth of the process. So the ATAR is a rank. Remember we had OP1s to 25. We're now starting at 99.95 and then going down. 0.05. And universities, you can see it now, they have published what their ATAR scores are for their entrance. You actually need to remember, and this is super important, Remember I said before you have to be clear about the range of ATAR that you want. So coming in and saying, I want a 99.95, yeah, I know, you probably do. But what is the range you need to get accepted into the course that you're going to want to do? And the reason that is super important is because inter-subject scaling is going to happen. So what that means is they're going to be able to scale the subjects so that they can compare the child in maths methods against the child in general maths. So while everybody says every subject is equal when it contributes to your ATAR, they're all equal when they give you a QCE point, but they're not necessarily going to be equal when they scale them. So that is really important when you come to talk to us, because if we pick some subjects now that look, I'm being really straight around this, because everywhere you read will tell you, oh no, it's all good, do what you like and enjoy. Yes, I support that. Unless you want to be in the top 5% and you're capable of doing those subjects, there's some subjects that will contribute more effectively to a really high ATAR than others, just by the nature of scaling. Other people will say to you, oh, but Queensland hasn't run this system yet, so how will we know which ones will scale well or not? Well, New South Wales and Victoria have been doing it for years and years. We've looked at it, okay, because that's our due diligence, to give good advice. And I don't think the kids enrolled in mathematics methods here are that different to the ones in Victoria. So how does that scale against the kids who are in general mathematics in Queensland? So again, that is something to keep in your mind. But not everybody needs to be in the top 5% either. And remember, the top 5% doesn't mean that you're good or bad, it just means that it's a high demand course. Because it's a supply and demand thing for university. That's all it means. However, if there's a prerequisite subject, it also means you need to be able to do that to an effective level to be successful at university. That's really important. So 0.05 increments. The top one, probably around 31 kids in the state will get that, based on the numbers and the calculations. And again, I'm writing this and being clear about that. Inter-subject scaling will happen. So again, I say to you, what range will you need if you want an ATAR? Have that ready so we can have those conversations in our interview, and an honest conversation about it. In the student packs, I think we've got the information. So this table shows the OP band, so for those of you who are familiar with that, and the ATAR conversion that's gone on over the last 3 years. So an OP1 here, what was the lowest ATAR? Is that I can't see. Is that 99.845? Sorry, I can't. Oh, blind as a bat. Yeah. So, why do we show you this? If you're used to understanding OPs, and you know most of us know, oh yeah, you want to go to medicine, it's OP1. You want to do physio, it's this. Or if you want to do primary teaching, it's that. That will help you to understand what that translates to. Okay. This is the last one they'll do because. That was the last group to graduate with OPs, okay? But you'll see, we've been giving out ATAR scores since we've been giving out OPs, because kids from Queensland have been going to universities interstate, and they require an ATAR score for that. Have to do English, and this is one of the things that we've said to everybody, do the English you're most capable of doing, but you have to pass it as well. Okay, so even if it's not your favourite thing, people, you have to pass it to go to university. It devastates me that it's not your favourite thing, but anyway, as an English teacher. So how do we calculate them? Again, we will super guide you through your subject selection to make sure that if that's what you want to do, you pick correctly, you choose correctly. But basically, you know how we have 6 subjects? They pick your best 5. Remember, one of them has to be English. Then you can include an applied subject as well if you want, but then they'd pick your best 5. Actually, no, they will scale an applied subject 1, won't they? You don't even want to go there, what that would look like, but you can include that. But just significantly, for those of you who are familiar with what we used to do in OPs, if you remember back in the day, you might have done a switcheroony, pulled your kid out of OP and put them in a Cert 3, and they would have then got an OP 9 or something. It's much higher expectations around vocational education and training now, so it's not quite possible to do that as effectively as we used to. Again, can't say it enough, you've got to pass English. And what we've learned, and this is probably going to be a bit disappointing for some of us who are parents of kids who prefer the idea of running hard at the end rather than being consistent, consistency beats intensity. It really does. Particularly if you think about retaining for a 50% exam, keeping that content in your head. We know how fast the content is in some of the general subjects. The kids will say, we feel smashed by it. It's bang, 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 and miss a lesson and in some of the subjects. That's why if you're looking at an ATAR and you want a reasonable ATAR, coming and asking us to do TAFE at school, we're going to be saying, why? Why? What is it? What's your point? What's your purpose? So the content is pretty fast and furious. You really do. They do need to be very independent readers and writers, but particularly writing. So teachers can't check 5 drafts. So that independent mastery over being able to write a great teal paragraph or a good introduction, you have to be independent in that space because it's so tightly managed, our rules around that, and the confirmation process, we don't assign you the mark until someone's confirmed that it's the right mark. So those are the adjustments that everyone has to make around the daily work in classrooms. So the feedback has to look different. The other thing, in 2022, if you're on an ATAR pathway, you need to be able to remember in November what you learned in the November of the year before, because Year 12 actually starts, or we can't talk Year 12 anymore, it's really Unit 3 and 4 starts in Term 4, Grade 11. And that content will be tested in some of those 50% exams. So you can see that consistency intensity argument about keeping the content alive. There can be no help in the exam, so they do need to be across everything in an independent way and have mastery. And those exams aren't going to be ones that you can actually quickly grab the book 2 weeks before and have a crack. Get on and have a look on the QCAA website. In the public-facing website has some examples of what those external exams look like depending on the subject you're doing. And I say to do that, not because I expect your child to know the content, they will learn that, but just to understand the demand of them and the things that they're needing to get into control over and why they need to develop their independence and mastery. Do the subjects you're most capable of. Make sure you know about your prerequisites for outside of school as well as at school. So there are prerequisites for senior subjects. And just remember that the basics do matter. They're still going to have to do loads of reading and writing, regardless of whether they do general or applied. So what's next? A lot of you, I think, have booked your parent-teacher online interview time with us, which is great. So I urge you to make sure you get your work done before that so we can have a great conversation. So go through the One School tool, okay, and you heard what Mr. Crosby said, all the work that they've been doing already, so the kids should be all over it. And if you're stuck, go in and have a look at Education Perfect as well, because the materials are available there. Check your emails, people. Students, it is old-fashioned, but it's the way we do things, so you need to check your emails. especially the one around your recommendations for English and mathematics. Then you could complete your SET planning online, do up some draft subjects, and then we will organise the contracts. So there's some contracts that we sign, you know, responsible uses of phones, enrolment and agreement on being a senior student, that type of contract. Your child will be very familiar with the One School tool that's used to record all of this. So basically they'll go into One School, enter some information. Mrs. Hopes, Mr. Sparks and myself, we will be going in and looking to see how much work they're continuing to process in the lead up to the interview, so that we have something that we can look at. If you're on my list and you haven't done the work, I'm going to be stalking you in a nice way, in a caring way, to make sure that you've done the work so that we can have a good conversation. So that if your parents are taking time out of their working life to come and have this conversation, we need to make sure that we're ready for it. So they're the tabs. You'll know them when you see them. Your child's going to be all over it. They're going to be awesome teachers to you, and they're going to invite you into those conversations, aren't they? Okay. Key messages. Make sure you do all that planning before, please. Then you'll get so much more out of that interview, I promise you. Know your prerequisites. What do you need after school? But what do you need to get in maths if you want to do math methods? Okay, am I meeting that prerequisite? When you get into the One School subject selection tools as well, they will be all there for you as well, okay? Please get on and have a look at the demands of the syllabus. And parents, you can do that. It's all there on the QCAA website. So you can dig in around, and some of the subjects you go, I wish I had that when I was at school. Looks really interesting. But just knowing your child and you can see the demands, just see whether or not that's going to be a reasonable approach for them. If you want an ATAR, what range do you need? And that means you need to go to those university websites, get onto QTAC and work out what's the range, what's the ATAR you need for that subject. And if you're interested in TAFE or vocational, make sure that you're across that. I think we're pretty good in that space from a number of students because we've had a number of people who have applied. But then we need to balance that against the subjects you've selected to make sure that you haven't, if you've got too many general subjects and you're going to miss too many of those, we're going to have a conversation. So much information, so much general, broad information, and our job is to narrow it down for you, for your own child's pathway. So that's the next part. So what we're going to do now is we're going to let anybody who has a question that you think we can address now that's not terribly specific to your individual child, but generally about the process. I'm not going to come at you with the microphone, but I'll get you to sort of yell it out, and then we'll try to answer any questions if anyone has any. Here's a couple of questions from the last group. How will I know which science my child is going to be able to do? And Mr. Sparks, you want to answer that one?
So with the science, there's such a range now. The idea in terms of choosing your science A is a prerequisite for the course that you want to study at university. Or is it a prerequisite for the field you want to study? Secondly is to look at what the recommendations are for Maths and English and match that with the prerequisite information that you will have for the science subjects. So in terms of studying physics, we would want B level in extension maths and a B level in English in the U10 report. We would also want you to be studying maths methods as a minimum when you went into senior physics. Okay? So look at those prerequisites that are coming from those subjects and match that with the recommendations and also what you need for your university course further on down the field. It'll surprise you if you go to do veterinary science, that you need physics and chemistry, but not biology. Okay? So there's some odd combinations in there, make sure you're aware of them.
So they're the sort of questions we're happy to answer if you have anything like that. Any? Yes.
About scaling subjects.
Yes.
Something that you find out
No, they won't publish them anywhere. So, and the reason for that is they're going to hold that line that says, well, we don't know because we've never had any kids do this curriculum before in Queensland. Okay? And that's the line they use with us as well. But we know very confidently what goes on in Victoria and New South Wales. We also have been part of an initial study, as you would expect us to do, as your quality local high school who's looking after the best interests of families. We've been part of a process with a very well-renowned education consultant who's a number cruncher extraordinaire, who's been looking across a whole range of schools to look at which subjects are doing super well and predictions. So we have probably a pretty good view of that. It isn't that different to the old OP, okay? You would expect those students who are sitting in physics classes doing maths methods and working at that level with that level of content, their subjects in terms of cognitive load and their performance then on exams, you compare that to what you might see in other subjects that don't have that similar load, which one do you think is going to scale better? And that's what they do, yeah. No use doing that though if you fail it as well. So that's that balance that we want to have without being silly about it. So those people say, yeah, I'm going to do I'm going to do all the maths and sciences because, yeah, okay, but why? What's your purpose? And I guess that would be the other open conversation that we have, because you have to be capable of being at the top in those subjects anyway. Yeah. Does that help? And we're not able to publish a list of good or bad because it's not quite that simple. But we can tell you, if you say to me you needed between an OP 1 to 3, which is the equivalent of 99.09, and tell you, and you come to me with a set of subjects, I will be saying, I'm sorry, I'm concerned about that. I don't think they're realistic choices for the ATAR you're aspiring to. That's what will happen in the interview.
And so something that will get nutted out potentially in the interview.
Yeah. No, great question. So, right, the restrictions around key learning areas that you have all the way through junior secondary are gone. We say you have to do a maths and you have to do an English here at Aspley, and then you can mix it the way you want to, making sure that you've met the prerequisites that you have for post-school study. Yeah. So you're not restricted. I know you'll all be sad about this. It doesn't mean you have to do an arts and you don't have to do a science. I do say though, we all say this in the interviews, if you're unsure about what you're doing, you really need to do a broad and general approach. So I would be recommending you should consider a science, a humanities, and mainly because the humanities to give you that great writing stuff that you might need depending on which university course you decide to. And a science then, if you decide to do teaching or if you decide that you want to go into some other area, you've got that basis. Again, have a look at the syllabuses and you'll see the skills that they're developing and understand how they could be an assistance in post-school life as well, yeah? Hope that wasn't too namby-pamby, but no, you don't have to pick out of each KLA, but you need an English and a maths. Yeah?
How consistent is the SETP planning across all schools in Queensland? In a scenario where if someone moves in to Aspley in year 11?
Fantastic question. Yeah, that's a real tough one because, of course, each school offers certain subjects. So moving during grade 11 and 12 is a real challenge now for young people and trying to match up their pathway. So, yeah, it is a challenge. SETP planning is expected of every school. How they go about it is different. Moving from one school to the next is a really big deal in grade 11 and 12. And we often, bless Alison, often's trying to patch together. Do you want to speak to that, Alison, a bit?
Yeah, it's challenging because of the subject crossover between schools, but also there's not definitive timelines like semesters that used to define results now. So a student takes, for example, we start Year 12 work Unit 3 halfway through term 4 of Year 11, whereas other schools might time that differently. So it's a juggle also, yes, between subjects and learnings that students have from various areas, and also the timing junctures of when students might move and catch-ups or missing components too. So yeah, it's
Good
a
question.
whole lot more challenging.
Yeah.
System.